So today I'd like to do a movie review of A Cure for Wellness. And in fitting with the purpose of this channel, I'd like to analyze the movie from what I would call a Petersonian lens, to look at it as Jordan Peterson might look at it, and comment on it using his psychological and symbolic method. And as I'm doing this little introduction, I hope I can play some of this trailer for you so you can see some of the scenery that's involved in the movie. It's a very beautiful movie, and I hope this doesn't get my video get a copyright infringement or something, because I know if you play some videos you can get a strike pretty quickly. But it's a rather idyllic setting in the Swiss mountains, and there you can see a car crash from Gore Verbinski. And on Rotten Tomatoes, this was a completely underappreciated movie. It only got a 41% Rotten Tomato score from critics and a 41% from audience members. And I think most people, from what I read online and the reviews that I watched, missed the whole point of the movie, or they missed large parts of the movie. And I found that kind of unusual, because usually people that I watch reviews from, like Stuckman, they really get these types of artsy movies and they really delve into them deeply. But this time, I don't know. Maybe he didn't do a spoiler review, which this is going to be basically a spoiler review, because I think you have to get into some of the spoilers to understand the movie. So I think I'm going to stop this video shortly. There's only a few more seconds. And then I'm going to move to images, still images. But you can see it's a pretty crazy movie just from this trailer if you haven't seen it already. I would highly suggest watching it. And I'll move to some images. Alright, so as I said, from watching reviews, people didn't really understand that the movie is really broken down into two parts at minimum. The first part is set in the real world, or what we would call the real world, and that's actually happening. That's the stuff that actually happened to the main character, Lockhart. In this part, we're introduced to the main characters and the plot. A greedy, ambitious young businessman named Lockhart is sent on a mission by the board of his company to retrieve another member of the board, Pembroke, so that a merger could take place. He travels to Switzerland and tries to find Pembroke in a wellness center. While traveling up a mountain to get to the secluded wellness center, which was a former castle, he hears a little bit about the history of this place from the taxi driver. In the center, he meets a doctor, a nurse, and several patients. Going back down the mountain, he noticed a girl standing on the ledge, high upon the castle walls, and the cab driver comments to him about her. And I believe there's a good picture of this somewhere here. Maybe I passed it. Here she is on the wall again, and here she is on that part. This crash marks the end of what I would call the first part of the movie, which is set in reality, or the reality that is, quote, the objective world, which we are used to referring to, that which is real. The next part of the movie is not set in this reality, that objective world, but in Lockhart's mind. Perhaps as he is dying from the car crash, we see an elaborate fantasy play out in his mind. I also have a secondary theory that I won't go into much here, but it's that the rest of the movie takes place not in Lockhart's mind, but in some kind of purgatory. In any case, we now embark on a story that starts to part with reality gradually over the next 2 hours of the film, until we get to an unbelievable climax, with the main villain, Dr. Vollmer, being a 200-plus-year-old pedophile, incest-loving creature with his face falling off as he tries to kill our protagonist so that he can rape his own daughter. It seems to me that Lockhart combined two things in his fantasy. He took the bits and pieces about the history of the castle/wellness center that he heard from the cab driver on his way up the mountain, and things he actually saw in his short visit there, and created a story in his dying mind, similar to other Gothic horror stories he might have known, like Frankenstein. First, Let's deal with the major imagery in the film, namely the eels and water. Many reviewers have been confounded by these things, asking, where did they come from? Why do they live so long in that water? And they yell about plot holes. Plot holes. They existed in the first part of the movie, the reality-driven part, as part of the gate to the wellness center. And I think there's a good picture of that right here. This is the shot we're supposed to kind of take note of these eels, as well as I believe the protagonist Lockhart also takes note of them. So he notices them and we notice them, and that's in the first reality-driven part of the movie. Eels represent the unknown monster in the depths, in this case the literal depths of the aquifer beneath the wellness center, but also the figurative depths of Lockhart's mind, his unconscious. They also represent male sexuality and appetite. This animalistic side of man, if left unchecked, can devour him and destroy life, but paradoxically, it is also what sustains life in an evolutionary way, since sex leads to reproduction. I think this is why the eels are both monsters that feed on and kill people, but also, if harnessed properly using our intellect and technology, can bring life everlasting. It seems like Lockhart, being devoted to his work, had little time for a social life or even personal life. We could imagine that he didn't find time to indulge in a girlfriend or sex, and this latent desire shows itself in his dream state, where he finds a girl, rescues her, and runs off with her. Now for the water. Lockhart definitely noticed that the water was an important part of this wellness center, while he had that short visit to release Pembroke. His mind took that and ran with it, using it in an archetypal way. Water was historically a symbol of cleansing and purifying. Note how in his encounter with Pembroke in the pool, Pembroke seems disturbed, guilty for the life he led, and so dunks himself in the water. He disappears for quite some time, so long that Lockhart thinks that perhaps he has drowned himself. In his reappearance, he seems different. He seems cleansed of his guilt, but he has not changed his ways. He seems ready to return to his old life. The water is also a vehicle for the eels to kill people. Water, again, symbolically has been used in myths and religions as a way to purify, sometimes by killing, as in the Great Flood told in the Noah story of the Bible. There are two major female characters that are important for understanding the symbolism and nature of the story we are being told. I want to first touch on his mother. She's a major reason why I'm calling the second part of the movie a dream. In his visit with her, she presents him with a figurine of a ballerina, dancing with her eyes closed. He asks why. Why are her eyes closed? And she says it's because she is dreaming. The question asked is, from what I can recall, what will she do when she wakes up? I don't think this is resolved, but I think this is the way the film introduces us to the idea that we could be seeing actions taking place in a dream. Later on, after he has fallen into madness and the control of the wellness center, he is given this ballerina figurine again, and it triggers him to return to his senses. One of the other things that reminds me of being in a dream is he has this crazy dental sequence. At first his teeth are falling out, which is a common occurrence. It's a common kind of nightmare scenario in dreams that people have, that their teeth fall out. And so he goes to a dentist, and then eventually he has this crazy tooth extraction scene. I'm trying to see if there's any other, like here's a bunch of teeth. I think this is to kind of nudge us in the direction of the dream world instead of the real object reality. So some critics would say that this dream device is a gimmick and makes the content of the movie worthless because nothing was actually accomplished. But I draw parallels with the movie Stay. It has Ryan Gosling in it. And spoiler alert, it has a similar theme, in which the protagonist is able to resolve his life issues in a dream state before death. This is meaningful because, to the protagonist, this is reality, and his actions change him as a person. This is often when Jordan Peterson would comment, that such a thing is, quote, real enough. It is a mental reality, even a fiction, that is real enough to the subject experiencing it to cause a personal change of character and a change of action in the world. This, as Peterson points out in his Maps of Meaning book, is important because the world can be summed up as a forum for action, not just a place of things. The second major female character is that of Hannah, played by Mia Goth. She is a prepubescent girl who is being taken care of like a daughter by Dr. Vollmer. The elixir Vollmer has been giving her throughout her life has been slowing her aging process. He has been waiting hundreds of years for her to mature, to reach puberty so that he can create a child with her. This plays out in a crazy marriage scene, coupled with a rape scene and a ballroom dance happening simultaneously. This is all put together purposely, of course. The marriage and rape typifies ancient culture and ritual. Romantic love is a recent evolution of our understanding of marriage and courtship. The incest is the dark, animalistic part of our sexuality that is unrestrained by culture, and so happens in the depths of the aquifer, among caves and water, lit by primitive fire. All the while, the workers of the wellness center are dancing synchronously in the ballroom, symbolizing the well-functioning society where each man is coupled with a woman to further civilization. The music is the pattern of the world order that we live in, and their dance is the movements or actions we take in the world to not only survive, but to thrive as a species. They are celebrating a successful pairing and procreation that results, even if it is in the form of an incestual rape. This is the rationalizing of evil that can come from a tyrannic hierarchical order, as represented by not only the doctor over his nurses and staff, Dr. Vollmer, but the old order he also represented as the baron lording over his townspeople. To further understand Hannah, though, I'm going to quote about 2 pages of Carl Jung from his Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, about the archetype in the form of the anima. Hannah, in my estimation, fits this to a great degree. Anima means soul, and should designate something very wonderful and immortal. Yet this was not always so. We should not forget that this kind of soul is a dogmatic conception whose purpose is to pin down and capture something uncannily alive and active. An uncanonical saying of our Lord's aptly declares, "Whoso is near unto me is near to the fire." For Heraclitus, the soul at the highest level is fiery and dry. Being that has soul is living being. Soul is the living thing in man, that which lives of itself and causes life. Therefore God breathed into Adam a living breath, that he might live. With her cunning play of illusions, the soul lures into life the inertness of matter that does not want to live. She makes us believe incredible things, that life may be lived. She is full of snares and traps, in order that man should fall, should reach the earth, entangle himself there, and stay caught, so that life should be lived. As Eve in the Garden of Eden could not rest content until she had convinced Adam of the goodness of the forbidden apple, were it not for the leaping and twinkling of the soul, man would rot away in his greatest passion, idleness. A certain kind of reasonableness is its advocate, and a certain kind of morality adds its blessing. But to have soul is the whole venture of life, for soul is a life-giving diamond who plays his elfin game above and below human existence, for which reason, in the realm of dogma, he is threatened and propitiated with superhuman punishments and blessings that go far beyond the possible deserts of human beings. Heaven and hell are the fates meted out to the soul, and not to civilized man, who in his nakedness and timidity would have no idea of what to do with himself in a heavenly Jerusalem. The anima is not the soul in the dogmatic sense, not an anima rationalis, which is a philosophical conception, but a natural archetype that satisfactorily sums up all the statements of the unconscious, of the primitive mind, of the history of language and religion. It is a factor in the proper sense of the word. Man cannot make it. On the contrary, it is always the a priori element in his moods, reactions, impulses, and whatever else is spontaneous in psychic life. It is something that lives of itself and makes us live. It is a life behind consciousness that cannot be completely integrated with it, but from which, on the contrary, consciousness arises. For in the last analysis, psychic life is for the greater part an unconscious life that surrounds consciousness on all sides, a notion that is sufficiently obvious when one considers how much unconscious preparation is needed, for instance, to register a sense impression. Although it seems as if the whole of our unconscious psychic life could be ascribed to the anima, she is yet only one archetype among many. Therefore, she is not characteristic of the unconscious in its entirety. She is only one of its aspects. This is shown by the very fact of her femininity. What is not I, not masculine, is most probably feminine, and because the not I is felt as not belonging to me, and therefore as outside me, the anima image is usually projected upon women. With the archetype of the anima, we enter the realm of the gods, or rather, the realm that metaphysics has reserved for itself. Everything the anima touches becomes numinous, unconditional, dangerous, taboo, magical. She is the serpent in the paradise of the harmless man with good resolutions and still better intentions. She affords the most convincing reasons for not prying into the unconscious, an occupation that would break down our moral inhibitions and unleash forces that had better been left unconscious and undisturbed. As usual, there is something in what the anima says, for life in itself is not good only, it is also bad. Because the anima wants life, she wants both good and bad. Bodily life, as well as psychic life, have the impudence to get along much better without conventional morality, and they often remain the healthier for it. The anima believes in the beautiful and the good, a primitive conception that antedates the discovery of the conflict between aesthetics and morals. It took more than 1,000 years of Christian differentiation to make it clear that the good is not always the beautiful, and the beautiful not necessarily good. The paradox of this marriage of ideas troubled the ancients as little as it does the primitives. The anima is conservative and clings in the most exasperating fashion to the ways of earlier humanity. She is not a shallow creation, for the breath of eternity lies over everything that is really alive. The anima lives beyond all categories, and can therefore dispense with blame as well as with praise. Since the beginning of time, man with his wholesome animal instinct has been engaged in combat with his soul and its daimonism. If the soul were uniformly dark, it would be a simple matter. Unfortunately, this is not so, for the anima can appear also as an angel of light, a psychopomp, who points the way to the highest meaning, as we know from Faust. If the encounter with the shadow is the apprentice piece in the individual's development, then that with the anima is the masterpiece. The relation with the anima is again a test of courage, an ordeal by fire for the spiritual and moral forces of man. We should never forget that in dealing with the anima, we are dealing with the psychic facts which have never been in man's possession before, since they were always found outside his psychic territory, so to speak, in the form of projections. So I thought that was really interesting, and I thought it really reminded me a lot of Hannah. Hannah is the girl that needed rescue, as well as the stimulus to move beyond the control of hierarchy dominated by Volmar. She was innocent, yet drawn to the bar, the music, even the bad elements therein. She was Lockhart's anima, his love and his soul, the soul that he didn't have as a businessman, that he was losing, that he couldn't connect with. She was his becoming and his being. Her rescue was him saving himself, saving his soul from damnation. In a Jungian sense, you could say it was part of his individuation process in which he becomes whole in his consciousness instead of divided. In this film, our protagonist goes from thinking that those who are escaping their responsibilities as leading businessmen and women are crazy and unwell, to thinking that there probably was something wrong with him to begin with, for thinking that the life he was leading was normal or healthy. He changes his perspective on the world, and we see this particularly at the very end, when he encounters the other board members riding up to the wellness center as it is burning down. This encounter is another reason I think this is part of a dream sequence. Why on earth would these bigwigs be riding up to this place in reality? They would of course send people to do their bidding, just like they sent Lockhart. Some reviewers see this as a plot hole or weak writing, but I see it as a further clue as to what is actually happening. These are in fact the last representations of his need to comply and assimilate to the Western stereotypical, cartoonized version of capitalistic, quote, wellness. Instead of capitulating to their demands, he picks up his bike and rides off with the girl he always wanted, but was too busy trying to claw his way to the top to get. As we approach the final image of Lockhart riding away with the girl on a bike, I'm reminded of something from Jung's Red Book. I'm going to read that passage. It's a short passage, and I'll put up the picture, it's somewhere here, of him riding away on the bike. So Jung says, "My soul spoke to me in a whisper, urgently and alarmingly. Words, words do not make too many words. Be silent and listen. Have you recognized your madness, and do you admit it? Have you noticed that all your foundations are completely mired in madness? Do you not want to recognize your madness and welcome it in a friendly manner? You wanted to accept everything, so accept madness too. Let the light of your madness shine, and it will suddenly dawn on you. Madness is not to be despised and not to be feared, but instead you should give it life." And Jung responds, "Your words sound hard, and the task you set me is difficult." And his soul replies, "If you want to find paths, you should also not spurn madness, since it makes up such a great part of your nature." "I didn't know that this is so." And the soul replies, "Be glad that you can recognize it, for you will thus avoid becoming its victim. Madness is a special form of the spirit, and clings to all teachings and philosophies, but even more to daily life, since life itself is full of craziness, and at bottom, utterly illogical. Man strives toward reason only so that he can make rules for himself. Life itself has no rules. That is its mystery, and its unknown law. What you call knowledge is an attempt to impose something comprehensible on life." Lockhart's mind is thus imposing something he can comprehend, some order, some story, a narrative of his life and being, and now probably his death as well, in order to give it some meaning. We end the movie with Lockhart having the look of a madman on his face, a maniacal grin symbolizing that he chose madness over his old life. And perhaps it is in this madness that he finds his cure for wellness. Thanks for listening, and if you found this at all interesting, please like and subscribe. Thank you.